The title is Inclusive Leadership Strategies for Fostering Diversity and Collaboration. This important discussion will be moderated by Biljana Braithwaite, founding partner and CEO of Sustineri Partners and chair of Women on Boards Adria.
Brilliant group and a very complementary group, so I'm looking forward to our great discussion. I'll start with a statistic that we've all heard. It's been repeated so many times. World Economic Forum has just told us that if we carry at a current pace, we will have full equality, full gender equality in 131 years. So we will have full gender equality, not for our daughters, not for their daughters, not for their daughters, but possibly the daughters of theirs. And I think we can all agree that that surely is unacceptable. And that's the starting point. That just cannot be. So we have speakers here today who are, in their various ways, helping make sure that doesn't happen. And some of them have joined us following our announcement last year that we will launch Women on Boards Adria, and have worked with us. And we've achieved quite a bit, thanks to many partnerships with those on the panel and many of you in the room. So we'll see a very short video about Women on Boards Adria and our last year, and then we will move on to the panel discussions. If you could please play the video, thank you. For these boards to be truly inclusive, the board actually needs to decide it wants to embrace change. The board needs to know why it wants to have plurality of views, and so that we are not creating picture-perfect women who will then come to boards and not have a voice. So it is an important point that it's about changing corporate culture as well as creating a pipeline of women. And it's been a pleasure to announce today's initiative of Women on Boards Adria. Thank you very much. We are very proud, and look us up. Do connect if you'd like to hear more about our mission. I'll start with you, Anino. You have, apart from accomplishing a lot in sort of finance as a sort of former senior banker, you've devoted a great deal of time for making the new blueprint for a more inclusive workplace. And as you said, and you said it last night as well, the assumption is that workplaces are neutral, but historically they've been built for man. We are not aware how much bias we encounter. Most of it is unconscious. So how do we deal with that? Unconscious bias is the most challenging issue to tackle, in particular in making sure that women have equal opportunities to advance to leadership positions, not only boards, but boards and C-level?
Thank you, Biljana, and I'm truly delighted to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've had some time to meet quite a lot of you and delighted to see familiar faces and friends already. It is a big question, but I'd just like to answer that with just a very short framework for action. And is what I call the 4 A's. And the 4 A's are as follows. The first A is advocacy. So advocacy is what you do as yourself, the person who is underrepresented, and women, and what actions can women take for themselves. But we know that it's not all about women. It's about the people we work with, men and women. So the second is allies. Who are those men who are also working to make sure we have equal representation and that workplaces are, work well for women? So, so the first is advocacy, women. Second, allies. The third is alliances, and by that alliances, we're talking about networks and how do networks, especially for women, help women to advance, and where women learn from each other. And networks are not just actually just women, business networks are men as well, but those networks that will facilitate women progressing, because it's recognized that it's good not just for women, but for organizations, for society and economics and economic development. And the fourth is advocacy. And advocacy covers, making change in terms of policies within organizations and changing policies and also changing also laws, which is at a governmental level. Because the issue is an issue which concerns 4 billion people, 4 billion women, but I've been corrected on that, and people say, no, it's actually 8 billion. It concerns and it's beneficial to absolutely everyone on earth if we have gender-balanced leadership. So that's just a little framework to tell us how we can look at actions in order to advance to equality. Unconscious bias has been caused by the structures that we've seen through generations, and it actually requires real action and not just having some unconscious bias workshop.
What you just said really resonated with how we have approached our mission in WOBA. Our key argument is this is not a gendered issue, this is a societal issue. By not tackling it, apart from anything else, we are depriving boys and girls of that GDP growth. We are depriving the whole next generation of potential, and this is how it ought to be talked about. And therefore, men are not, men are actually ought to be equally invested, because if you look at it from that perspective, that is a battle for us all to win. Sanela, who is the next panelist I'd like to speak to, is someone who many women in the region, and this is what I've learned, in particular since you've joined WOBA as our lead ambassador for Bosnia and Herzegovina, look up to as inspiration in banking sector. You've held very senior roles, and you've clearly left strong impact, both in professional terms, but then also very much in work that you have done with younger women, with the initiative that you've launched in Bosnia previously, to support them on their career path. What do you see as the main barriers to to women first getting their seat and then being heard when they get the seat at a table from your experience, professional experience in private sector in the region?
Thank you, Biljana, for a very nice introduction and for having me here. I think mentality of people in Adria is really burdened by various stereotypes. And I think for anyone who is from this region, I don't really need to elaborate on how that manifests itself. Yeah, and there were times when manifestation was very strong and robust, and nowadays we live a life when manifestation of these stereotypes is rather subtle, but it's there. Yeah. So what I think we can do to encourage women to enter boardrooms more, and through this I will try to explain what obstacles are, how to address them, is education, mentoring, and encouragement to networking. Yeah? When I say education, I don't really mean technical expert education. Women do not lack this. Yeah? I'm talking about teaching them things that will help them advance more and enter the boardrooms more. And I see here two things. On one hand, women have habits, which in my opinion, slow them down on this path. Yeah? And we need to teach them how to get rid of these habits. These are habits of perception of being emotional, ruminating, not having sufficient confidence in themselves, minimizing themselves by talk or composure. So on one hand, we need to teach them that. On the other hand, we need to teach them how to navigate towards and through the boardroom politics. And these are things that you do not learn on your university. These are things that you need to pick up. So eventually they all pick up, we all pick up with some degree of pain, but I think it's very useful to teach them that in advance. Yeah? This is one thing. Second thing is mentoring. I strongly believe mentoring is the activity that has the biggest impact on bringing women to boards. And you have evidence of that everywhere. I also comment from my own personal experience of me entering a boardroom somewhere after mentoring, or someone else in this region entering a boardroom after my mentoring, or from the project that you mentioned. We have ongoing mentoring project in Bosnia. And why? Because by having a mentor, you actually get access to a very experienced person, potentially a role model. It can be a female or not. If it's a female, then it can be a role model, someone for whom you can say, okay, she has really made it, despite the obstacles. Yeah? So get her some optimism based on that. You have a person from whose mistakes you can learn rather than your own. Yeah, someone who shares vulnerability, and you can get a feeling of, okay, my concerns are not only mine. Yeah, and you get a lot of valuable business-like advice. So I think mentoring is really a powerful tool, and I think we should try and encourage it everywhere. Of course, it needs to be properly structured in terms of matching people and content. Yeah, and lastly, networking. I think it's also very important. For men, networking often is a primary gear of advancement, not always, but sometimes, yeah. For women, it doesn't have so much impact because I think women have psychological barrier to use good relationships that they have for their own advancement. Although we as gender are by far better in creating deeper relationships. Apologize if there's no good. But still, we can encourage them to network, as you did, Biljana, here. I think some degree and exposure to networking can help them be more encouraged to get into the boardrooms.
No, brilliant. And I think, goes back to, what we discussed sort of a couple of times. It seems that some of our greatest strengths at some point become our greatest weaknesses as well. It's the sort of that need to, do job to a very high level of perfection and have very high expectations of ourselves. That then sort of the sort of flip side of that is that lack of security, because once you come to very senior positions, you do need to operate in gray zone quite a lot, sort of be prepared to take a risk more. And that is where our sort of otherwise strengths, when we work in somebody's shadow, become a bit more of a challenge.
Exactly,
when we need to advance, and this is and this is why women like you. I mean, you said something beautiful as well when we did a webinar with you. You said, "I'd like to be a person I would have liked to have met when I was young. This is what motivates me," and I think that's sort of hugely important. We underestimate how important it is for young women at the beginning of their trajectories. Just one conversation can make a huge difference. I'll move to Brankica. Again, sort of a friend, a close friend, but a friend of initiative. When we shared with you our concept of women on boards, you embraced it immediately, but you are more broadly from sort of with the clout that you bring as Commissioner for Equality in Serbia, very outspoken advocate for gender equality, and you've engaged in what is becoming a sort of public dialogue in Serbia about, are we actually in some ways going backwards? Is our society becoming more traditional? And how is that patriarchal model affecting women? I guess two questions in this address. Sort of what motivated you to support WOBA mission as our ambassador, and how do you see the importance of more women in business leadership in the context of that wider agenda? Because at the same time we are talking about rise in gender-based violence, sort of epidemic of femicides, as it seems, in the region. How are all these issues interconnected?
Thank you very much, my dear Biljana, for having me today and for a very nice introduction. Yes, why I decided to support Women on Boards, your initiative. Of course, first of all is about people. Because of extraordinary women, you managed to bring together all of us. And of course, it is a really simple reason. It's completely due to my personal, first of all, above all, my personal values, and of course, due to my agenda and my mandate of institution I am in charge. And lots of work we should do together, lots of work in front of us, because you know why, how does system function, because you know that patriarchal systems are very persistent and resilient despite the resistance. That system is nurtured through business etiquette, culture, customs, rule of thumb, practices, subtle mechanism, not true legal framework, because we made milestone legal equality. Political climate may actively approve various forms of discrimination, sexism, and misogyny. And the problem of gender-related violence is minimized, in spite of the fact that is a symptom of larger systemic problem. Further, talking about culture, many girls here grow up to learn to have empathy and how to be a good wife, whatever does mean. And many boys grow up to learning that real men, macho men, should fight. And these damaging narratives echoes through movies, video games, mass media, toys, etc. I will mention only two very present practice that happen under the influence of patriarchal mindset and patriarchal strong mechanism in this region. Women still quite often renounce inheritance in favor of male descendants. This not only limits of their choices and their financial security, but also sends a message that they are not part of their primary family, and that their children too, do not have equal links with mother family. And the second one, then there is also parental gender selection, even more today in favor of baby boys. This is perhaps the most vicious of all practice, which are the result of patriarchal mindset. And what we should do. The good news that we are witnessing a shift today in TIF, thanks to you, Biljana, and your tireless team. Today we can see that heroes become people who are not afraid to show empathy, emotional intelligence, and full spectrum of emotions, and solidarity, etc. We are moving away from harmful masculine narrative towards a more healthier, more inclusive concept of social life, which give us, all of us, much greater choices for a healthier life, for fulfilling life without meaningless distractions. And we should continue to foster a culture of equality and respect, and share good practices, promote achievements, etc. And further steps to change is above, of course, we all agree that above all, education, awareness raising, informational ability, media outreach, and conscious effort exerted from early age to instill a different and new mindset in children. And of course, we need men as an ambassador of equality and human rights. And I think that we have to be proud today that how many men it's our supporters. And in every minute we should be aware that each woman has her own story of strength, resilience, and ability to overcome obstacles and rise above challenges.
Thank you, Brankica. And I think it is actually striking that in spite of the work that has been done with medical doctors, we still have selective sort of practices. But I was shocked by the statistic that I've sort of seen recently for Serbia, that over 40% of women sort of don't take ownership of what belongs to them according to inheritance laws. And that goes up to 60% in rural areas.
Yeah,
That's
especially in rural areas.
In terms of disempowerment of next generation, it's sort of remarkable that, and as you say, laws on paper are sort of absolutely fine. And I know that you are looking at doing work with girls at schools, which is fantastic. But you mentioned men, and speaking of men, we have our man. We have. Do you know, Mato? And I'm not going to put you on spot here, but we'll send you the pledge. We have launched a pledge last year, in which we asked men who would like to support the cause of WOBA to sign up to not joining what is called panels, male-only panels, to always check with organizers. Because optics matters, symbolic matters, and so I'm just wondering whether you could be a good candidate. We can talk about it later. But you have, when we discussed your intervention and how you could got involved in the summit, because we thought it's fantastic that you can make time and join. This is the panel that you chose as your preference, and I was really impressed by that, and then you repeated that today. So why? What motivated you?
First of all, Biljana, thank you for inviting me and for being so kind to accommodate my wish to be in this panel in the company of such wonderful, accomplished female leaders. Maybe just it's wonderful also to be in Montenegro. Today, I'm here wearing two hats. One hat as an academic and an educator, as the leader of the Zagreb School of Economics and Management, the dean. Second hat is more of a corporate hat as a member of the supervisory board of Hipotekarna Banka, one of the leading banks here in Montenegro. And because of these two dual roles, I would like to provide two perspectives on this question. Let me start first with the academic and educational one. And just for the context again, Zagreb School of Economics and Management is essentially the role that we play within Croatian and regional ecosystem, at least that's how we see it, is a similar role that London School of Economics plays in the UK, Stockholm School of Economics in the Nordics, Bocconi University in Italy. So we are the leading Croatian internationally accredited business school. 30% of our students are international. And what's more important for this panel is that more than 50% of our students these days are ladies. It is in our core mission to educate future leaders. And because we exist for more than 20 years now, we're one of the oldest private non-for-profit Croatian business school, business university. We already see the results of our efforts, in the sense that many of our alumni are today leading some of the largest Croatian companies, or they're in the government. So this is what we do. And as I said, if our key goal is to create future leaders, then the question that you asked me and the question of this panel is a very relevant and important question for me, because more than 50% of my students are ladies, and which means that, somewhere along the line in the future, they will become leaders. And how do I, as the dean, as a male dean, how do I bring them, or how do I help them get where they want to be? I think it was Mr. Pašić in the first panel. I see him waving over there. I told him I would reference him because he said a very simple thing, but it kind of resonated. I was carefully listening to him here in the first row like a nerd. He said something along the lines, essentially when we think about the ESG as a concept, it's about truth, it's about self-reflection, it's about honesty. And I like that very simple idea, because what do I, as a man, know about all the problems that female leaders have had to go through on their path to success? What do I know about all the glass ceilings that they have broken through? What do I know about all the discrimination that they had to face? What do I know about all the problems that in our patriarchal societies here in the region, they had to fight? Not much, nothing. If I want to be honest with myself, I don't know much. I've had my own way. I never had to deal with, what do I know about the work-life balance between, family, having a child, being a good mother? What do I know? Not much. And this is my starting point, okay? If I don't know much, and I'm leading an institution that professes that in our mission, we want to create future leaders, we have, many female students, then I need to think about, okay, if I don't know much, then what do I do in order to help my female students progress and reach the top of their careers if they want to? And then I have two things. First, so I have two, let's say, points on this matter. First of all, there's a body, at the business school, we have a formal education process, which is basically, the formal accredited curriculum. Students take classes, passes exams, but equally as important as a high-quality formal program is the informal part. Sanela mentioned about the education, the mentorship. We have a very important body at our school, which is our advisory board, where we have very successful, accomplished ladies and men, but specifically I was very careful to get highly successful ladies. One of them used to be the former CEO of Jimmy Choo for all of Americas. Now she's a CEO of another very successful fashion company. Another lady is a former Goldman Sachs McKinsey MD. Now she's on the board of Richemont Group, one of the largest, probably one of the top 2 luxury companies in the world. Another one is a high-powered investment banker in Citigroup, managing director in New York. These ladies, I asked them, you need, come to my advisory board, but don't just be a letter on the website. Engage with my students, engage with female students, come to the school at least once a year, and that's what we do. At least once a year, mentor them. So I think this kind of educational program, I think having these super successful ladies and then basically putting them in front of my students does a lot of magic, because then the young ladies, young girls see and say, wow, actually, now that you break down the problem of how to get to the top, I could do it. Before I heard your story, I thought it was impossible. But now when you break it down in such a way, it's actually not, I could do it. Another thing I did, I became the dean 4 years ago. And as a dean of a business school, private business school, meaning that we're not funded by the government, you have to be nimble. You have to take the opportunity when the opportunity arises itself. 4 years ago, I had such an opportunity. 4 years ago, I had opportunity to hire a very interesting person. That person is a very successful female leader, not just in Croatia but internationally. Has had a very powerful and strong career. And very quickly, when this opportunity arose, I did in fact hire her. I'm talking about the former president of Croatia, Madam Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović. So her only full-time job is at Zagreb School of Economics and Management. We gave her a role that is, I basically didn't do anything very original. I copied Harvard University or Kennedy School of Government. What they do is there's this role called executive in residence. Executive in residence is exactly what we gave her. So she's at the school full-time, has her office, students have she has been giving several lectures on female leadership. She's really into this topic. In addition to being at the school, she's also engaged she's the executive member of the International Olympic Committee, but it's not a full-time job. So those are the two key things that she does. So by putting such strong and powerful women in front of my students, I think this is already a big step in that direction of demystifying female success. Just to finish your question and provide maybe the second perspective, the corporate perspective. So if I take a step back and maybe look at the ESG in general as a concept, again, I like this, what Mr. Pašić said, the honesty and truth when it comes to ESG. I'm very proud of my colleagues at Hipotekarna Banka, because as you know, I mean, banking sector is highly regulated, right? In every country, it's just that kind of industry. But recently, what we did and my colleagues did is they did something that was not asked by a regulator. They undertook a very time-consuming and extremely effort-intensive project, and they issued and as a first bank in Montenegro, sustainability and impact report. Again, with the desire, for me, the ESG story, it's not a destination, it's a journey. Okay, it's not about getting there and then you're there and then you're done. Okay, you get your badge and go home and be happy. No, like you graduated from a university. No, ESG is a journey. But the first step, if you're serious about it, is a self-assessment process. Just like I would say, both at the personal level, but at the corporate level as well. So I think the sustainability and impact report was an extremely important step in this direction of, where are we and where do we want to get? And it was a serious report. I read it through. I mean, it's 40 pages. It looks into all, and both, all the aspects of ESG in terms of environmental. They went as far as, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, hiring policies. Like it's a very, very good document, but it's only a first step. It's the beginning. So that's why I like that we started it. And I think many others will follow also here with a similar story. So I hope this kind of answers your question.
It absolutely does, and of course we know I've spoken to Hipotekarna Banka about. You're absolutely right. A regulator is only about to ask banks to act, so it's a brilliant step. But it's great. I mean, I know that you run a world-class sort of education institution, but I didn't realize how fortunate young women are. And I think you're absolutely right. Somebody told me recently that, again, very accomplished woman, that sort of young, a woman in her 30s approached her and said, "You changed my life." And she said, "What do you mean? I don't even know you." And she said, No, you did. I've attended that talk 8 years ago. And at that time, I was sort of making a decision on whether to do X or Y, and my life took a different course, and here I am now, and these are going to be my next steps. So that one encounter actually can count.
Very powerful,
for
can
quite,
be. Yeah.
Absolutely. Olja, I'll move to you. We had President here with us yesterday. We know he's a great champion of the cause. He supported here in Montenegro Irena Radović, governor of the Central Bank of Montenegro, has launched Women on Boards initiative. Their first cohort of women has already completed the training, and I know that President was one of the first to embrace it. I know you're one of his key advisors. I know others. I know that whole of ESG agenda is close to your heart, but how do you see women's advancement is sort of in government? What would be your advice? What's your assessment of sort of what's happening at present? And probably sort of a bit broader than your immediate environment, which I'm sure is very good because it's all about people, as Brankica said.
Thank you very much, Biljana, and thanks for having me on the panel and on the summit and making it possible to see a lot of familiar faces today and with my esteemed fellow colleagues from the panel. So as you said, yes, here in our country, so in our region basically, but in our country as well, we are good at the things that are in papers, in laws, but sometimes we lack in practice and in everyday activities that should follow those laws. The societies that generally consummate democracy do this as it is. What's in the papers, it's in reality, but sometimes here in our region we do have some obstacles and difficulties to do so. So basically what was needed, as we saw it at the time, is to put a stress, to put an accent on these things, and this is what the president of the country and his cabinet did in the previous period of 1 year, and even before that, when the president was a minister of economy. And I think this is a very important part of our joint mission, even today here, is to put an accent on something that is also equally important as protection of women and giving it the power, the wind, in order to continue their journey. It's something that is tied to economic empowerment of women, which is also equally important, and as all of these things that are mentioned. Being a part of some previous government as a deputy minister of economy, my task was to create policies that would make it possible for women in order to be successful in the economic sphere. And by doing this, I realized how hard this can be in practice. So it's one thing that you make a strategy, it's one thing that you push a bill or some kind of a law forward towards the parliament to adopt it, but it's a matter of how you design it. It's a matter of how you see. It's whether it's gender-sensitive budgeting, whether it's some kind of supportive measures for women in business. It's basically something that cannot be put as it is. It needs to be tailor-made for the country. It needs to be tailor-made for the economy. And by doing this, I realize how hard this can be in practice to perform. So continuing this journey within the cabinet of the president, my task is to make something that is very close to my heart, and I think very appropriate to the subject of today's panel, is to make sustainable development as well as the ESG standards more present, more visible, the thing that other policies or other things should look up to. This is something that it should be a reality, not something, okay, in our region, this is something that we currently need to aspire to, but I think that in the future period, this would be a normal thing for us as well. By forming a cabinet, I think that this would be a proper fit to explain this. Out of, I think, 11 president's closest associates and advisors, 6 or 7 of them are women. So I think that this says a lot. I'm one of them as well. So as you said, the president is very supportive on the initiative that is women on boards. This is something that is tied to his also mandate as a previous banker, as a previous minister of economy, mine as well as being a part of some system of before, is to have as many women as possible on the boards of important state-owned companies or private companies. This is very important, because this is not something that, I don't know, some European institution told us to do so. This is not a matter of ticking the box. This is something that is regular thing to do so, because this is a normal thing, because the women are qualified by the education, by the experience, by the equal society possibilities. And I think that this would be initiatives like this and similar to this would be something that a cabinet of the president would support even in the future.
Thank you, Olja, and thank you for sort of reminding us of how complex it is. I remember us sort of doing a report on gender pay gap, specifically in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and then you, of course, come to but this, if we bring more women into the workplace, this gap will to begin with grow and only then sort of shrink. You know, it's sort of a whole range of policies that you sort of, in particular, wearing your previous hat in the government, had to look at. mindful of the time, we'll have another round of questions, but we'll have to be briefer, unfortunately. This sort of, from what you were saying, I'd go to you, Brankica, because, and we spoke about this quite a bit, we all agree, we want equality, we want more women, and then we say, okay, should we legislate? Yeah. And to an extent, in European Union, that debate is of academic importance because European Union did. Companies that are listed have to have targets by 2026. But what's your view on quotas or targets or however we are going to call them? Do we need them as transition mechanism? Because we will hear very opposing voices and we will need to engage with governments on that.
You mean to achieve the goals defined by directives or? Yeah, but I think it's maybe too early to speak about good examples because now we are preparing system for the new directives. We already had the opportunity to speak about that, but I think that that system and companies in Serbia, and I notice in region too, they're more ready than we expected because they many of them already prepared and have such kind of inclusive leadership, and they're ready to accept EU directives. And of course, we have a previous good practice of political participation of women, because a quota system definitely function. We have experience now. We have 40% of women MPs at the national level and all local levels, thanks to quota system, and decision makers was ready to accept my recommendations and initiatives to change election law and all the others recommendations. And today I noticed that many companies are ready to accept, and they already have more women on the very high position, and not only on boards, but on the all level of managerial system. And I already had very good experience with all private companies in my country. I don't know how many of them, hundreds and hundreds, signed a partnership for diversity and equality, and they're ready to promote and to foster equality, diversity, inclusion, and that two principles became part of their corporate culture, which is really important. Yes, legal framework are important. We should create good legislation, but that's not enough to change society, to change a narrative, to change a system. We need people who are ready to lead through example. Sometimes it's more important. We all know that's what is the most difficult to change, of course, mindset, and we need more supportive measures. And of course, equal participation of women in all spheres of life is much facilitated by positive example. Women leaders, CIOs, and managers are good example for all of us, and especially we all emphasize the role of young people, and I agree with Olja that above all supportive measures we created are really crucial, and to have supportive political decision makers. And I think that, yeah, that's all.
I think you're right.
Only to add, we need strong institutions for human rights. We always speaking about rule of law. Sometimes we forget that it's only question of human rights, and we need stronger institutions talking about legal side and more strategic cases. I know that you also like that part of my job, strategic litigations, and we were won at courts, and together with all the other recommendations, opinions, but of course we need legal practice, which is really and good examples everywhere. And I will I will go to the end only to share with you that as we speak at the same time, in National Assembly in Serbia, my colleagues together co-organize a special event to mark today International Day of Girls in ICT. I think it's really important to have more girls in high-tech industry and informational technologies. So they today celebrate together. This is today a multi-stakeholders events, which is also crucial to be together. Public authorities, international community, civil society organization, academia, private sector. It's only one possible way if we have the same goal, and in that case, sky is the limit, of course, if we manage to bring all of us together as we did today.
It's great that our panel is coinciding with this day that I haven't spotted. I think you're right. From my conversation also with companies, and we were together at Koponik Business Forum, I think they see the business case for this agenda, which is very important, because whilst we all understand why we need sort of quotas both as accelerator and also for, what Anino was mentioning last night, those magic 30% that is needed so that the voice on the board is heard. We want businesses to understand that this is pro-business agenda. This is not European sort of union's legislation for no obvious reason. Sanela, you spoke about what women need. What do these boards need? When we pass this legislation and we have our percentages, with your experience on boards, how do we make sure that the rest of the board wants to integrate this diversity and plurality of views? Because it will take two.
Pardon, sure. I think for any of the strategies to work, someone at the top owners, they need to claim that gender diversity is a value that is respected in their organization. So I think if that precondition is not met, everything else is useless. But under assumption that this precondition is met, I think boards, males in the board obviously need trainings on diversity to be repeated, and most of all, they need to understand the business case, as you mentioned, and the benefits, because there are empirical evidences that presence. So if you look only at Fortune 500, you can easily distinguish, and there are a number of researchers there that are basically saying that final financial indicators of a particular company with higher percentage of female are better. And this is known why this happens, because of the specific characteristics of females that they bring to the table. So I think what companies in general need to do, with their boards being on top and doing it, they need to develop diversity strategies. And they need to say, okay, we're not there, but this is where we want to be in 3 or 5 years, and take gradual steps. And they need to choose people on the top that would basically walk this talk. Ideally, women. That's that was mentioned earlier on. But if it's not a woman, then a man who understands the importance of gender balance, like Mato. Most of these top managers, they get some kind of psychological evaluation when they're hired, And what one needs to look in that psychological evaluation for this cause is that you're hiring a manager that is humble, that has courage, that is vulnerable, that has empathy. These kind of people are best inclusive leaders, and they will make the culture to work in a sense of being open to female balance. And then, of course, one needs to put boards need to put different activities in place. You cannot just talk about gender balance and not ask people to be accountable for it. So managers need to have, apart from training, they need to have specific KPIs that require them to be open to gender balance and to impose it. And they need to be called for a responsibility if they do not do this. If they do not fire a person who doesn't speak about gender balance properly or harasses a woman in the work, or if they do not hire a woman on basis of the merit. So, and this goes on and on. But when I comment this, I don't comment as a theoretical exercise. Yeah, I've done this, and I am convinced it works. Yeah, so 10 years ago, when I was appointed as CEO of a bank, most of the PR around that was the fact that I was the first CEO in the country. This came to my dislike because I thought the story was about really crappy organization that needed to be restructured and sent to IPO, which eventually happened, yeah, and it was a decent success. But everyone was talking about female CEOs, female CEO. It turned out that this brought me a strong sense of responsibility to be an ally of women that were in that organization, yeah. And to cut the story short, by implementing these strategies that I've mentioned, by the end of my first mandate, we had an organization where first level of management were 100% women, second level was 75%, third level were 50%. And we closed the salary gap. But not as a visual thing, we literally contracted everyone's salary to close 25% difference in salary. So I strongly believe this is possible. And there are a lot of executives from private sector here. I mean, I urge everyone to make a small step. I mean, everyone obviously is pro-gender balance if they're sitting on ESG conference, yeah? But some people have done a lot, some people are just starting. I think if we all go to our offices on Monday morning and take 15 minutes and what can we do, I'm sure we can make the difference. And we can come up with a big thing as of, I'm gonna rewrite my diversity strategy and put a quota in it, or I'm gonna find a woman who has done a job well and promote her, or even if not that, I'm gonna give her a compliment. I'm going to give her an advice, yeah? So I think we need to commit ourselves to make small steps all the time. This is what I ask from ladies that are part of our mentoring network. They get everything for free, and the only thing I keep going around for 6 months and telling them, I'm asking you to repeat this and give someone what we have given you. And I think if we do that, then the impact is going to be bigger, because it's not someone else out there who's going to make the difference. It's us, all of us, yeah?
God, we are lucky to have you on WOBA. I've told you this so many times. Mato, you've got finger of the pulse on the younger generation. We spoke about men and their perceptions. Are young men thinking differently? Do they understand? Because you've told us what you're doing for young women. Do you see young men wanting sort of this agenda to, because we sort of spoke a bit last night, and you've joined us sort of later about a bit of a backlash. We're also witnessing it, sort of this sense that it's a win-lose, potentially, and it's shrinking opportunities for men if we have more women, or is the pie growing larger? This is, I'd like to hear, I mean, I know what your view is, because I can see how supportive you are of the agenda, but what's view of the 18, 19, and 20-year-old young man you have at your
Yeah, I don't have the view that it's a zero-sum game, and I don't think the younger generations also do. So I'm actually quite optimistic about the state of the younger generation, despite them having to grow in completely different circumstances than we have done, especially in the context of these new technologies and the deficit of attention. So I think young men, even in our region, are becoming more sensible to these types, to let's say, and are being grown with more empathy than the previous generation. So I think the trend is positive. When I think about, as an educator, let's say as a leader of a business school, when I think about leadership in, whether it's male or female, I always think back to my time. I used to live, before becoming the dean of Zagreb School of Economics and Management, I used to work and live in Asia, in Singapore in particular. I was a professor at Singapore Management University, and I enjoyed reading all the books by the founding father of Singapore, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who had one strong view on leadership. And I remember that sentence exactly. He said in one of his books, I have met exactly 0 leaders who have become leaders as a result of having undergone a leadership class, which is what business schools basically, I mean, Harvard Business School, the most profitable part is the executive education on leadership. So that is what they sell. That's where they make money. Now, as an educator, I obviously cannot fully agree with Mr. Lee Kuan Yew despite his wisdom and success, because I think education does have, just like ESG, leadership is a never-ending process. It's a continuous learning exercise. But as an educator, we had 4 years ago, I just became the dean, we were thinking about this exact problem, how to create future leaders, what do we do? Do we offer a new leadership course? And then somebody had an idea, no, let's offer a master's program. Let's do a new master's program, but with the focus on entrepreneurship, but not just any entrepreneurship, but impact entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship that at its core has more than just profit seeking, but it also wants to align with the SDG goals as defined by UN. And I love the idea. It wasn't my idea, by the way, it was one of my female faculty members, and I was like, this is a great idea. I said, go for it, do it. She assembled a team of three universities, our school, Zagreb School of Economics and Management, ISM University, which is a leading Lithuanian business school based out of Vilnius, and HEC Liège, which is one of the leading Belgium business schools. And together we designed this program. It's like a triple master's degree. Underlying assumption is successful entrepreneurs are by default successful leaders. You cannot be a successful entrepreneur if you're not a successful leader. So instead of educating young people in something that's called a leadership class, no, we'll teach you how to become entrepreneurs. And then by default, if you are a good entrepreneur, you are essentially a good leader. And what we did is, because I thought it was such a great program, we applied for this EU Commission program called Erasmus Mundus, which is basically Commission's flagship program for master levels across whole of European Union. It's highly competitive. I had low expectations that we will get it because it's super, super highly competitive. However, we did get it. We were selected in this very competitive process, which means that EU Commission loved the project so much that they decide to stamp it and label it as Erasmus Mundus program, and they decide to provide full scholarship. So all the students who get accepted, they don't have to pay for anything. And moreover, more importantly, than just covering the tuition fee, they also provide for the duration of the program, which is 18 months, a monthly stipend of 1,400 euro, which is enough also for Belgium. No, for Zagreb, it's a lot. I mean, if you're a student, you can cover all your costs with that stipend. And it turned out to be a wonderful and successful program. And this is one example of how we as an educational institution, ultimately the students work on a project, they get 3 degrees at the end. We're receiving, I mean, it's a great success. We're receiving more than like 1,000 applications for this program for all over the world. And the stories are crazy. I mean, we have students from Africa who have, Nigeria who have started a microcrediting, microcrediting local institution and uplifted and empowered local women. We have students from Pakistan, from Latin America, Argentina, like just incredible students. Would love to have some students from Montenegro also. I'll give you a secret. I'll give you a secret. Not just Montenegro, but Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and Serbia are like target countries for our program, which means that if we have a good applicant from one of those countries, the chances of getting the commission are higher. So if you know anybody, in your vicinity, friends, or if you know a future social entrepreneur. The program is called EMI, Erasmus Mundus Master in Impact Entrepreneurship. You can Google it. If you know an aspiring future entrepreneurs.
Can I nominate my daughter?
Yes,
Mato?
you can, of course.
Is that allowed?
It's a wonderful program.
Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, I'm glad to hear we have such program, and presumably I can just imagine that sort of agenda we are discussing over those 2 days is exactly. Heavily sort of embedded in your master's
in the curriculum.
Program.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Carrying on with my youth theme, Olja, you told us what you're doing, so but you're still qualified as a young woman. So tell us about young women. What's the experience here in Montenegro? What's the experience in the region? Are sort of things changing very quickly, if you could?
Yes, just like Mato mentioned about younger boys, I can tell from the perspective of young girls. my personal opinion is that young girls these days are more are stronger and more strongly advocate for themselves that, for example, me when I was their age. So I can see progress in that area. And if you ask any of them, I think that the answer probably would be I don't need an advice, which is a good thing. But nevertheless, I would give the perspective on that. Basically, I think that the trend is positive and the things are changing because nowadays young girls are very self-confident. They know, for example, if they're well educated, and I'm going back to this importance of the education, they're well aware of the fact that education is a baseline for society of equal opportunities. And this is something that I'm strongly convinced as well, that the education is great precondition for success in the societies in our region, whether this is formal or informal education, because as Mato also said, the formal education is something that is normally a must, but in some life circumstances, not everybody can be a part of that. So the importance of informal education is also crucial because it somehow compensates with the things that in rather different circumstances of life one cannot get. Basically, this is something that I think is a mechanism, is a very powerful tool or soft power, however we call it, for all the future success in both in personal and in professional life. So I think that is somehow a recipe that youngsters these days are very well aware of in comparison maybe to us 10 years ago or something. And thank you for that young at the beginning.
But
It's all relative, Olja.
Can I hijack a little bit of time? I'll hurry up because we're like on this, where things are changing in mindset. And I want to comment the difference in reaction to 3 generations of women in my family. My mom was a working mom. Well, a manager for a good part of her life, but 50 years ago when she was supposed to have me, she was passed for promotion because of the fact that she was having a baby. And she was clearly told it's her fault. Yeah? And she unfortunately took it as her fault. 30 years later, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was determined not to lose a promotion, and I got it when she was 6 months young. It came with a cost, yeah, for my health and for the overall situation, but I was really determined, and I worked day and night that this does not slip away. Recently, so 20 plus years later, my daughter goes for a job interview. It will turn out later that she overheard my conversation when I was CEO with my HR manager. I was criticizing her for allowing midline managers to ask people on interviews whether they're planning for family. And I said they cannot ask, they cannot decide based on that, they cannot affect, it's rude. Today it's rude. And you cannot, when someone is pregnant in the team, you don't ask when they come back. Manage your resources differently. It turned out my daughter overheard that. At the time, I didn't know she was interested. So she goes on an interview and guy asks her if she's gonna plan the family. And he was even careful, he was like, you know, I'm sorry, I'm asking, I don't want you to feel less valuable because you're a woman, but I need to know this because I need to have continuous research to bring my decision. And her answer was completely different than my mom and I would have given her. Her answer was, she actually told him, sir, I can see that someone told you this is an appropriate conversation, but you just can't help yourself. Huh? And she said, no, I'm not planning a family. No, I don't feel uncomfortable as a woman. And no, you're not good enough for me to be my employer because this is what your mindset is. Yeah. So I think the good news is I think generationally this mindset changes. The bad news is it took 50 years from it's my fault to, I mean, who are you to ask me? Yeah. And I think it's really a slow progress because we have a lot of stereotypes. But I like to think things are moving.
But it's still
Sorry
a progress,
for hijacking.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And, you know, I feel sort of I'm catching up with my daughter slowly as well on that sense. Please, it's sort of...
Yeah, only to add something. Yes, of course, I'm sure that, of course, that especially our generations have special obligations to solve some things that don't lead to the next generations, definitely. But Only to remind all of us to be careful to think out of the box and our comfort zone, and to think about women who are limited by poverty, by age, by disability, and who belongs to the disadvantaged, vulnerable groups as Roma community, etc. And even more today, we have some women who don't have even more proper clothes to look for a job and to go to the business arena. We should be careful and to think about that, and always think how to create measures for them. Don't forget that.
Absolutely.
And only to refer something to Mato said, I think today where we can find the best leaders today, maybe in the kitchen, because there are usually women, and today what does it mean to being inclusive? Leaders, women today have a special skill, because it sometimes is more difficult to run to lead kitchen than public state authorities, believe me. You know, from our mother and grandmother generations, we all know their special skills and capacities.
And juggling the balls.
Yes.
I have my moderator looking at me, so Anino will be quick, but I cannot not ask. I think we can all agree that our futures are in hands of young girls, young boys, and tech. How about AI? Do you see it as sort of accelerator for this agenda, or is it a threat?
AI, the way in which it can enhance our jobs and allow us to do the things which are actually more interesting, and remove a lot of which is actually boring, and it will actually allow us to be more of ourselves, allow us to use our intelligence and do things that are actually more interesting. So AI is actually, you can call it augmented intelligence. It is actually to augment our intelligence. Now that is the ideal. The reality is that there's a lot of bias in artificial intelligence, and we can see that. I did, a small test. It's on my my TEDx talk recently, and this, I think, is something we need to address right now, and that's why we do a lot of work on emerging technologies with women. Now, because the problem with that is that we have the risk of embedding systemic inequalities and biases into a system that is going to determine and dictate how we work, how we hire people, how we do a lot of things. So I urge all of us right now to actually focus on, we are at the beginning of change in artificial intelligence. This time next year, we'll probably be talking about quantum technology and quantum economy, which is going to be at AI at mega scale. And so we need to make those changes now. So a lot of things that we do while we look at upskilling, helping to upskill and reskill women, but a lot of focus is actually getting bias out of the system. It will augment our intelligence, it will make things easier, it will make life more interesting. But unless we remove those systemic biases, the problems that we might be facing in those 131 years are worse than what we're facing today. The other thing is that there is a gender gap in terms of digital technology, in terms of access. And so we need to also close the gaps in the gender gap for access to digital technology and make sure that women have access. If we look at the jobs and the kinds of jobs that will be lost, a lot of them are administrative, and very often we see that we have relatively more women overrepresentation in those jobs. So upskilling, reskilling, giving women access, closing those digital technology gaps, especially in areas that are are lower resourced, really are very important, and removing all those biases, and then we can really have AI deliver the opportunities that we really wanted to deliver.
Thank you. And just the time matters. The pace at which this develops just means that actually days count. Thank you very, very much. I know we overstep our time, but it was impossible not to with these panelists. So could I have a big round of applause for them?